In this video, I'm going to primarily talk about Wagner's first opera, The Flying Dutchman. But first, I would like to introduce the composer, Richard Wagner. Richard Wagner was born in Leipzig, Germany on May 22nd in 1813. He died on February 13, 1883 in Venice, Italy. Wagner was a great German composer during the Romantic period, who was primarily known for his operas. He was also widely known for creating operas with leitmotifs, but since The Flying Dutchman was his first opera, not many were utilized. Even though not many leitmotifs were seen in this opera, The Flying Dutchman became an influential opera to later composers. For example, in later years, Richard Strauss began to use leitmotifs in both his operas and his symphonic poems. Now for some background information on The Flying Dutchman. This opera was considered to be one of three of Wagner's so-called romantic operas. This opera was not like other operas during the Romantic period because of the use of leitmotifs, which is the use of music that matches a theme of an opera. Wagner did both the libretto and the composition of music for this opera. The Flying Dutchman is performed in German and was created by Wagner in 1843 in Germany. The first opera house that it was performed in was at the Champ de Mars in Paris, France. This opera attracted people who liked romantic and Italian-styled operas. In this opera, there are links to Beethoven, who is an inspiration for most of Wagner's works. This opera is haunting, dark, and has a twisted love story between a ghostly man and a mortal woman. The Flying Dutchman is split into 3 acts and lasts over 2 hours long. There are 6 main characters throughout this opera. The first character is Deland, who is a Norwegian mariner and sings in a bass tone. The second is Senta, who is Deland's daughter and sings in a soprano tone. The third character is Eric, who is a hunter and is engaged to Senta, and sings in a tenor voice. Mary is Senta's nurse, who sings in a mezzo-soprano. Deland's steersman, who sings in a tenor, and lastly, the Dutchman, who sings in a baritone voice. The Flying Dutchman, Act Number 1. This scene is set on a ship out at sea. The characters in the first act are Deland, Deland's steersman, and the Dutchman. This is an example of what the set would look like at the Opera House of Act 1. This act begins with suspenseful music from the orchestra that creates the sound of waves crashing from all around. I would like to play you about 15 seconds of the overture so that you could also get the idea of what this would sound like. When the music quiets, the act begins. The scene begins at sea during a storm. The music is acting as waves during the storm is an example of a leitmotif. In the beginning of this act, Deland leaves his ship to his steersman. His steersman falls asleep without noticing that another ship has pulled up alongside their ship. The Flying Dutchman is then introduced. He has been condemned to the sea, unless he finds himself a faithful woman. He is a ghostly man whose soul is trapped due to the curse. The curse doesn't allow the Dutchman to rest until he finds someone who truly loves him. Every 7 years he comes back to the shore in hopes of finding himself a lover. In this story, the Dutchman gets lucky because Deland offers the love of his daughter in return for treasure. They both agree on their offers and plan on making an official deal. Act Number 2. Act 2 takes place in Deland's home, where Senta is at with some maids. The characters that appear in the scene are Senta, Eric, Deland, and the Dutchman. Here's an example of what the set of Act 2 would look like at the Opera House. In the first scene of this act, Senta is looking dreamy-eyed and in awe at the picture of the Flying Dutchman that is hanging up in one of the walls at her home. She begins to tell the maids how he was condemned to the sea until his curse was to be broken by a woman who would die for him. Oh, true love. Eric then appears into the scene and tells Senta of a demented dream that he had about Senta dying because of her love for the Dutchman. Eric received the opposite reaction from Senta, who was all for the idea of dying for true love. Eric leaves upset and heartbroken. After Eric leaves, Deland and the Dutchman appear. The Dutchman and Senta meet, and it was love at first sight. Now, at this point, Senta did not realize that the man she was meeting was the Dutchman. However, the Dutchman says to her that she would die if they were to be together. Senta was thrilled and still had the idea that she was in love with the man that she had just met. In this act, there are multiple scenes that include foreshadowing of what the future holds for Senta and the Dutchman. Act number 3. Act number 3 takes place at a port near the sea. The characters that are seen in this act are Senta, the Dutchman, and Eric. Here's an example of what the set would look like at an opera house. This act may be the most dramatic and intriguing acts of the opera. There is a big feast made by the villagers for Deland's men before they go and embark the ocean and their travels again. The crew from the Dutchman ship are also invited to the feast, but since they are all ghosts, the party does not last long because it gets a little awkward. Once everybody leaves, Senta and Eric are the only ones left on stage, or so you may think. Eric begins to beg for Senta to love him again and warns her that the new man she loves is the Flying Dutchman, and that she will die if she stays with him. The Dutchman overhears the conversation and feels as if he's been betrayed. Poor Dutchman. Even though Senta would rather die and be with the Dutchman than with Eric, the Dutchman leaves in a fury. To show that Senta really does love the Dutchman, she jumps to her death in the raging ocean. Oh man. Because Senta jumped into the ocean to prove her love for the Dutchman, the spell has been broken, and the two lovers ascend to heaven. In the end, both the Dutchman and Senta end up with the one true love that they wanted to be with. Overall, this opera represented conquest for love, and that sometimes the people you least expect the most become the person that you would do anything for. In this case, die for. This opera contained foreshadowing through Eric's dreams and also a little bit of shadiness from Senta's father, who basically sold his daughter's love for money and treasure. This opera was unique because it was the first opera to use and implement leitmotifs. For example, in the overture, the orchestra created music to sound like waves and a storm. The music in this case was created in the background for the opera to begin and to get the audience interested in what was coming. I myself enjoyed this opera because it was a unique romance story that ended with true love between a woman and a ghost, two people you least expect to fall in love. Richard Wagner was a great composer whose work influenced the work of later composers with his leitmotifs and created phenomenal operas that will be remembered for many years and generations to come. Thank you for watching my video on the Flying Dutchman. I hope you enjoyed.